Greetings, YouTube. Alan Lube is back with another video. ProQuest Weekend 2 has just finished up, and I'm here with the NorCal Arakni Slayer, Taotao Chu. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Taotao. I played Arakni twice on Saturday and Sunday. Won both of those PQs. Got pretty lucky, but also I think this hero is, even though pretty low on the meta tier list, not a complete, useless nothing like as some people have been saying.
Well, to be fair, that is what I said in my last video. So,
Oh, is that what you said?
basically, I was like, I don't think he just has like enough card support to sort of like.
It's true. He did have kind of I guess half a set
Yeah.
for just all the basic cards, but yeah.
But
It
yeah,
does feel like, just in testing in, the past a few, weeks of Talishar and Armories that he does feel like he's missing something, so maybe the next set will give us some good stuff, but that doesn't mean he's, completely unviable right now.
yeah, I just didn't think there would be enough, considering how new he was and how little his card pool was. I didn't expect him to get there, but you won back-to-back ProQuest with this guy, so congratulations.
Mhm. Thank you.
And yeah, so let's go right into the deck. We're going to talk about the deck, some cards he doesn't run, some cards he's thinking about running, thoughts on what you might want to see in the next set, or and things like that. And then we'll go into matchups at the end. So before we get started,
Yeah,
please
so
like, subscribe, and
oh, yeah,
comment.
hit that notification bell. Yeah,
Yes,
make sure
yes.
you watch every Alan Liu video to
Mm.
get that, feed the YouTube algorithm.
Yep. All right, so let's start with equipment. This is like a pretty generic setup, I would say. Spider's Bite, Black Tech Mask, Tunic, and Goliath Gauntlet. Not
Yeah,
really any
so
surprises there, but what are your thoughts on that?
right, and I have, some no rune, in the sideboard as well as an, Arcanite Skullcap.
Mm-hmm.
So my general philosophy when designing this deck, because I sort of just threw it together from scratch and then I practiced it a bit, refined it. So I don't really have any net deck to follow because there hasn't been any results from him
Mm-hmm.
until pretty recently. So my philosophy was looking at his card pool isn't very good at doing a lot of damage, right? The non-majestic attacks uh, they all banish off the top and they can make you
Yeah.
silver, which is sort of like one silver, sort of half a life point because two silvers is another block.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't really do well in terms of swinging life. And generally speaking, banish in a fast game is pretty irrelevant. So for you to actually get value off of banishing cards from your opponent's deck, you have to banish the whole deck. And then once you do that, it's a free win.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured, okay, let's try to block out a lot, throw some cheap attacks out there, and disrupt the opponent until I can banish the entire deck and then win on fatigue. So the equipment is mostly designed to facilitate that. I think first off is, of course, Tunic, the most broken card in the game, and the biggest design mistake from WTR for
Whoa,
sure.
design mistake. You going that
Yeah,
far?
absolutely. I think so. Well, in a long game, right? In a really long game, you might go for 30 turns, which is like up to 10 resources, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it blocks for one. So that's like Bloodsheath Scalata levels of resource generation, and Bloodsheath is banned. Meanwhile, Tunic, extremely complex rules. You got to remember it at the beginning of every turn, which is like pretty much completely different from every other equipment. Um, and I think if this card were maybe a common or a rare, it would probably be banned by now because it's just way too powerful. But because it's a legendary and people spend a lot of money on this card and it drives the sales of boxes, I doubt they're going to ban it anytime soon. So we don't really have a choice. Like there's no assassin specific chest. All the other generic options are obviously incredibly inferior compared to Tunic. So of course you have to run Tunic. And this is a very good card in Arakni. He makes excellent use of if you block with 3 cards and you have only like an eradicate or an annihilate the arm left, you can tunic to play it.
Mm-hmm.
You can if you have a 2-cost attack, you can pitch a blue to dagger to get the dagger effect, and then tunic for a CNC or a surgical. So he
Yeah.
makes a really excellent use of tunic. So there is really no other option. If you were playing a budget version, uh, maybe hardened cross strap to
Mm,
make your 2-cost attack free
yeah.
once, but there's just absolutely no replacement for Tunic. So of course this is already an immediate budget gate into playing Arachne is that you must have this card, and there is no other option.
Yeah.
The second most. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was. You can just go for it. But I was gonna talk about. Let's go into like the assassin equipments because I remember
Yeah.
when these were first teased, everyone was like, "Oh my god, recursion and blade and battle worn. This is gonna be so broken." How do you feel
Mhm.
about that?
So I think Mask is definitely the better of the two, and if you're only gonna have one, you definitely want Mask of Perdition, because it's a uh, because it banishes an additional one for your attacks that are more likely to generate silver, say like Plunder the Poor against a deck that's all one or less cost. You're almost guaranteed to get an additional silver off it, which is faster recursion, right?
Yeah.
And it's also, I think, a pretty good for baiting out defense reactions. Because if you mask, even if you're not gonna, you're not gonna generate the silver off of it, you can often get your opponent to overcommit to like a sink below, and they're going to be overblocking by 3, and you can hold your attack reactions that you were maybe thinking about using, but you can lead with mask and pass priority, and then it's kind of a win-win. To banish off cards because you're not necessarily pushing for damage, right? You want to banish your opponent's whole deck. So if they don't de-react, then they lose cards off the deck. If they do de-react, you can either go over, or if you're not able to go over with attack reactions, then you just hold your cards. So in terms of like cards in deck, Massive Perdition is just great for um, pushing and also baiting cards out from the hand as well as banishing off the top of the deck. Black Tech Whisperers, I think, is significantly weaker, at least with the style of Fatigue Arakni I'm playing. You very rarely get to chain attacks in a row.
Hmm.
Also, if you lead with an attack and then they block you out, and you don't have enough to attack reactions to go over, it can be kind of a waste. Like if you don't have an attack reaction, you lead with the 0-4, and then you break it, and then they defense reaction against you, and you don't have a way of going over, then you sort of just wasted your go again.
And the
So
extra card in hand that you had also, right?
right, exactly. So then, like, if you don't have the arsenal space for your extra attack, then you just can't do much with your second attack. Whispers, I think, this right now is like what, over $100 or something. If you were to
Yes.
replace this with a Snapdragon Scalers for a consistent go again, you probably wouldn't lose out too much except for a point of life. I've heard this being called like an Iron Rot Boots, that sometimes gives you a go again,
Yeah.
and that's pretty accurate. It's good for the one block. Sometimes you get go again from it. Against decks that don't like to block a lot, maybe you can get like a Plunder the Poor into an Eradicate, and then banish 5 cards, get like 5 or 6 silver, and then bring back both your boots and your mask in a turn, and then it's really good. But most of the time, it's really just 1 point of block and maybe an action point.
Yeah. So with that, basically, whenever you have the option of bringing back Black Tag or Mask, you would most likely bring back Mask then.
Yeah, it's usually mask, because you can get a quick block with it, and then you can go again to try to banish more, and then the more you banish, the more you bring back. So late game loops, if I do get to bring back stuff at all, which sometimes like you get blocked out and then you just don't have equipment, and that's also okay. But if you're bringing back stuff in a loop, usually you're generating 1 to 2, and you're probably going to bring back mask, so you can banish more.
Makes sense. And then lastly, we just have Goliath Gauntlet. It's like the only good generic arms, to be honest. It's like,
Yeah, the other option I've seen is Iron Rock Gauntlet, which blocks for 1. Uh, 2 is bigger than 1, so use Goliath Gauntlet. And if you use it on a CNC or like a surgical, and you get your opponent to commit to 1 extra card from the hand, then that's the same as them not attacking with that card anyways. So
yeah.
you get value out of that. Yeah,
Yep. And
I
then
think
that,
uh, I think Goliath
yeah,
is really good. Yeah.
yeah. And I think lastly, let's touch on Spider's Bite. It's the only assassin weapon. You're not gonna run
Mhm.
Lashar or anything. But how do you feel about this weapon? Because back when it came out, people were like on and off about it. It's like it's a Kadachi, but it has piercing, but it also has like the on hit effect. How do you feel about this weapon?
Right. So first of all, the ping 2 to attack for 1. It just means that unlike Kodachis, you're probably not swinging with both of them a lot. Most of the time, you just attack with 1 and then follow up with an attack. Like you pitch a blue to swing with it, and you either 0 for 4 or 1 for 5. Um, so piercing 1, it's almost irrelevant. It just means your opponent plays around it by, instead of blocking for 1 against your dagger, they use that 1 block on your attack instead. It's usually not too relevant, except as I guess a deterrent. But it's yeah. The text most of the time doesn't make a huge difference. The trigger effect, so when it hits the next time they block with 1 or more attack action cards, So I don't know what's coming up with outsiders or further assassin support down the line. To me, like if I were to look at assassin as a package just from Dynasty, the trigger seems like a missed opportunity where instead of um, debuffing attack action cards, I really feel like this should debuff non-attack action cards as well. Like just and whenever they block with an action card,
Mm.
it gets -1 block for the next block. This way, it wouldn't be so skewed towards attacking decks or physical decks, and it would also affect stuff like a wizard and Dorinthea, both of which are pretty bad matchups.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And yeah, this dagger is like against Iyslander, Kano, Dory. This dagger is almost a dead card. It really is like a Kadachi for two. So feels pretty bad. I think if I had a wish list for a different assassin weapon, maybe just have like a different dagger that is like the same thing except instead of attack action cards, it debuffs non-attack action cards. Then I could have one of each, and then there would be a little more play against that style of deck. But yeah, thematically also, like Dynasty came out with the overpower keyword, which says that you can only block with one action card from hand.
Yeah.
So you'd think that Spider's Bite would sort of be like Assassin doesn't have any overpower keyword cards, but thematically it sort of fits that you'd think that okay, you could debuff all action cards, but no, it only affects attack action cards, which is really kind of unfortunate sometimes.
Yeah. Last thing I would want to touch on for this weapon is, let's say you would have a 4-card hand with like 2 blues and a red attack. Would you double Spider's Bite in that sense, or would you feel like if you double Spider Bite, it gives them too much room to simply block the second one to negate the first trigger?
So yeah, like if you hit with one, then and then you attack with the second one, and they block it with an attack, it resets both of the daggers, right?
Mhm.
I think if you can get them to commit to a block from hand on your second dagger, that's still a win.
Yeah.
I would like if if I'm not doing anything else with the rest of the hand, then always double dagger. If you're lucky, you can get like the 2 procs off of it, and if you're also lucky, they'll just block from a hand, and then you attack with like a 0 for 4 or 1 for 5, and it's still like kind of an awkward block for them.
Yeah.
So I don't see much of a reason to only attack with one unless you have attack reactions or like you want to black tech whispers for a second attack or something. But if it's like 2 useless blues and a red attack, you just go ahead and double dagger.
All right. Yeah. Sounds good. Let's go into the main deck. I think one of the first surprises that people will think of when they see this deck is you run very little red assassin attack action. There's only 3: leave no
Yep,
witnesses, plunder the poor, and annihilate the armed.
that's
Yeah.
because yeah, that is because I think assassin attacks are bad. So let's talk about the attacks that have good on hit effects, which are the 3 majestic ones. Leave
Yeah.
no witnesses, eradicate, and surgical extraction. So I'll just go over those
Mhm.
before I talk about like the
Yeah.
the common and rare red attacks.
Yeah.
So leave no witnesses, the CNC for 0, great.
Yep.
I mean, there's not much of that more that needs to be said with it. I will say that like usually if you see a red on top and it's like a good red, I would still bottom it. Leave no witnesses often gets blocked out, and it's often better to bottom a power card for the second cycle than it is to like hope for a banish off the top.
Yeah.
And if you do hit it, it's still worth destroying your opponent's arsenal. Even if you get 1 fewer silver from it, I would not risk a blockout um, just because having like good cards go into their hand, especially if they have a Crown of Providence or a Sink Below, they can get that card immediately, right? Let's say you're playing
Yep.
against a Dash and you want to stop them from getting a bunch of items on the board, and you see a Plasma Purifier on top, and you have a Leave No Witnesses, and you have like 2 shreds in your hand. You're like, okay, I'm going to banish this Plasma Purifier, but they still have a Crown of Providence up. No, you send it to the bottom. Otherwise, they're gonna crown their arsenal away, and they're gonna draw the Plasma Purifier, and then you're screwed. So
Yep. Makes sense.
but still, it's a CNC it's a CNC for 0. It's a great card.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, eradicate. Even though it's, I think overall it's probably the weakest of the 3. It's still very strong. Opponents that don't respect it and they just like think, okay, I'm going to push a bunch of damage with my hand. I don't want to block this out, and then they get 4 or 5 cards banished off the top. Or more if you have cut to the chase to buff it, and then suddenly, 5 turns later, then they realize I don't have enough attacks left in my deck to finish this guy off.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's uh, I think leading with it, if you as a 1 card hand, let's say you have no cards and like a tunic and you eradicate, it is pretty weak. in that if your opponent just blocks for 3 with 1 card and they banish 1 off the top, it's probably not going to be a yellow. It is one of your weaker attacks that if you don't have a support. But if you do support it with shreds, cut to the chase, or if it's like a second attack, like you lead with a 1 attack Black Tech Whisperers and then you eradicate to have a double contract fulfillment for a bunch of extra silver, then it becomes very powerful. So it's a bit more situational than the other 2 Majestics, but it's still a pretty good card. I definitely wouldn't run fewer than 3 eradicates. And lastly, Surgical Extraction. The best blue in the deck.
Yep.
This card, short printed unfortunately, so it's worth a ton of money right now. Hopefully they fix that printing issue with the next print run. But this card in the early game, because it is a blue and it's a 2 for 4, it is much more easily blocked out. But later in the game, when they can not afford to block out as easily, or when you have a pitch stacked pummel with it and you can go over, this card is just unbelievably powerful. If your opponent also is out of deck and they're just like swinging with their weapon every turn, and you're in that fab end game, this is this is the handbreaker where they either block it out and they lose cards from their hand from blocking, or they don't block and then you rip a card out of their hand and then they're screwed either way. So the absolutely nuts card. The blue, like getting silvers off of blues, I'd say pretty irrelevant. Just like do your normal look at the top. If it's a power card, probably bottom it. If it's something okay, you leave it on top. It doesn't really matter if you generate silver off of this thing. You just banish the 1 card from their hand. If you land it, you banish 1 card from their hand that cripples their hand, and then you're having a good time. So yeah, I love this card.
Yeah, let's touch on the pummel too. This is a 1 red pummel. Why red? I remember back then we were like playing around with blues and even more pummels, but yeah, why red?
Right. So I've tried a few different configurations of pummels, right? As soon as you see a hero that has 2 or more cost attacks, you're like, all right, I'm going to run all the pummels I can and see if it works. So of course, everyone throws in 6 pummels in initial testing, and then you realize that this card is actually pretty awkward. It only blocks 2. You need a lot of cards to make it work. So you start cutting pummels. Yeah, for a while I was like off pummels entirely. I had like maybe 1 blue pummel. I eventually settled on 1 red, and I think this is the best iteration of the pummel package of all the combinations I've tried. And here's why. So blue pummel I think is bad because it's only effective on CNC. And I guess you could surprise people with it, but if you're pitch stacking a blue pummel, it's much more likely to get noticed than if you like have a surprise red pummel. Red pummel almost forces you to not pitch stack it as much. You can maybe like hide it in your arsenal for a couple turns. And it can be awkward, but surgical extraction, if you blue pummel a surgical extraction, they're going to be like blocking for 6, of course. You cannot go over on a surgical extraction with a blue pummel because everybody's going to be expecting pumps or shreds or something. So it's it's basically 2 resources for a card that does the same thing as a yellow cut to the chase, and it's probably going to get blocked out.
Okay. Makes sense.
So pummel's only good when you actually hit with it, right? So if you'll notice, none of the other pumps in the deck are a true +4. So I've seen some people run like yellow pummels because you can pitch a yellow to a dagger or something. I think yellow is wrong because yellow shred and red shred and red cut to the chase are all essentially 3. Like red shred in the ideal circumstances can be +4, but in actual practice, it's very rare to get that value against like a sync blow or something. It's almost always against a 3 block on their initial block. So pummel is the one thing that just goes over by 4, and then if you're attacking with a surgical in the very late game, or even in the mid game, right, your opponents are going to be prepared for 7. If you have like 1 card available, they think, okay, maybe they can cut to the chase or like yellow shred, and they can be blocking for 7. If you go up +4, that's often 1 more than they expect, and then you can smash their entire hand. Same with CNC. Like if they commit to blocking on your CNC, obviously pummel's good. You have tunic available, so CNC pummel. The Oldhim classic.
Yeah.
That's why I run the 1 red pummel.
Would you, if you had the CNC pummel lined up, would you also commit your Goliath Gauntlet there, or would you even save it at that moment?
I absolutely would not commit Goliath Gauntlet there because at that point it becomes only damage, right?
Yeah.
Because nobody's going to be blocking 10 against your CNC, or like if they block 10 against your CNC, you hold the pummel and like you're still
Yeah.
winning.
Yeah.
But if they if they're probably going to block with 2 cards from hand, or if you daggered them first and because you had a lot of cards in hand, then maybe they'll block with 3 cards, and then pummel's enough, right?
Yeah.
Having the Goliath Gauntlet is for like late game like hand breaking situations where you want your surgical to go over by another 2, and they have to commit like another maybe 2 cards just to be sure they can cover it, or they just get ruined by surgical. So
Yep. Makes sense. Makes
yeah.
sense.
Okay, sorry, that was a bit of a tangent, but let's go back to your earlier question of so why am I running so few red attacks, right?
Oh
Okay,
yeah,
so
red attacks. Yeah.
yeah, leave no witnesses, eradicate surgical. Like these attacks are great. I think they're the best assassin attacks by far. All the other ones, they're either 0 for 4s or 1 for 5s at red, and the effects are just not good. Banishing 1 card off the top, even though this is a fatigue game, it doesn't have an immediate impact on the board. Generating a silver is at best half a point of life. So you're getting like from 0 for 4, it's like a 0 point for 4.5 compared to a generic card like Snatch, which forces a block out at the cost of you drawing another card, which is worth a lot more than half a point of life.
Yeah.
You do need some in order to get rid of have enough banish effects to actually fully fatigue your opponent, but I don't think you need to commit to a bunch of like slay the scholars or nix the nimbles, rob the riches, whatever.
Yeah.
Because those effects are just, I think, way too narrow. So 0 for 4 is good because you can play it with an otherwise empty hand, right? Since you're fatiguing, you're probably blocking a lot, so you block with 3 cards, you use 0 for 4, sure. Of the existing ones, Plunder to the Poor is by far the best for generating silver, because every single deck has one or less cost cards. Some decks are entirely 1 or less cost cards, and even the ones that aren't, like the Guardians, they still have defense reactions and whatnot that can generate silver.
Yeah.
So and of course, if we had infinite sideboard space, we'd swap out all the red attacks for whatever we could against to the opponent. But we don't have infinite sideboard space, and often you're bringing in a lot more than 60 cards to fully fatigue your opponent. So yeah, we don't have the luxury of picking and choosing. So Plunder the Poor is the best that covers everything. Annihilate the Armed covers most heroes. It doesn't work against as well against like a Wizard and Warrior. But it's still pretty good at generically making silvers for you. And 1 for 5 is pretty decent in a couple ways. You can play it with a pitching a blue for a dagger and then 1 for 5, in which case it's better than a 0 for 4 if you have 2 card hand. Or you can tunic for it. Or I think one of the best way to use these 1 for 5s is with that 2 card hand where you land a dagger. Dagger, because it debuffs your opponent's attack action cards by 1. Yep. If you 1 for 5 immediately after, and they block with 2 cards, then they're only blocking for 4. Suddenly, this 5 becomes a breakpoint, right? So 0 for 4 is an empty-handed breakpoint where they'd have to block with 2 cards or card plus equipment to fully block it. 1 for 5 is a different breakpoint for Assassin, where the debuff from Spider's Bite can make the blocks much more awkward. They either have to commit 3 attacks or like an attack and a non-attack, and maybe they needed that non-attack to make their synergistic hand work. So Spider's Bite, in a way, it also sort of indirectly hits non-attack actions, because even though it doesn't give them that minus 1 block, it makes them so that they're much more attractive to block with, right? Because you want to block for a 3 with your non-attack action, but maybe you needed that non-attack action to make your hand work. So yeah, that's why I have Annihilate the Armed, and I think more red attacks than that hasn't felt really necessary. Like the other attacks I have are just basically 3 CNCs and a bunch of blues. I'm at what is this, like 23 blues or so?
23, I think.
Yeah, 23 in the main. Feels about right. Sure, sometimes you get blue hands, but for a fatigue deck, it doesn't feel bad at all.
Yeah, you're most likely not going to have 4 card hands for the most part, anyways. So
yeah, blocking with blues is fine. Yeah.
Let's move on to the sort of defensive package. You have 3 Fate Foreseen, 3 Sink Below. Sink Below has become like a standard in basically every deck, a 3 of. Whereas Fate Foreseen sees some play in defensive decks, but yeah, I think in any defensive style deck you'd run 3 Fate Foreseen as well. But let's talk about specifically about like Sigil, Oasis, and Heart of Findall. So Sigil, why did you? Well, it plays with the plan, but why do you think it's so necessary?
Yeah, so for this whole defensive package, I guess it like the main board defensive package is the Sinks and the Fates, 2 Oasis, the Heart of Fandal, 3 Sigils. In the side, I have like a that all you got um, for like faster matchups, like a 5, for example. I'd also bring in its Guardian just because you can arsenal it for a dominate.
Yeah,
Another Oasis and then 2 unmovables, and those unmovables were just for Guardian
yeah,
for the really tall attacks. So in the main board, as you said, Sinks are great. Fates, I think if Assassin had an assassin specific defense
0 for
reaction,
4. Yeah,
yeah, the 0 for 4, then those would probably replace the Fates. Or maybe I'd run 9. Maybe nine's too many. But it's six defense reactions in this fatigue style deck is totally fine. Sigil of Solace is it's it's kind of a classic in fatigue style decks,
hmm
and I think it's good here to fully cover like wide attacks, right? Because if your opponent comes in for like 1, then 2, then 1, Sigil of Solace essentially gets like instead of being a 3 block, it sort of gets like the full 3 block value over like every time you play it, rather than having to be split across multiple attacks.
yeah,
But the downside is being it doesn't actually block. So of course, if your opponent has on-hit effects and you have Sigil stranded in your hand, then you can't prevent those on-hits as easily. The same problem with the Heart of Fandal.
yeah,
So it's Sigil is good, especially if you can like cycle it towards the late game, where every 1 point matters, and then your opponent's thinking like maybe I can get if I'm sitting at 1 point of life and my opponent's like trying to get me down with 1 power attacks, then Surprise Sigil can suddenly buffer 3 different attacks instead of just um, 1 attack.
yep, makes
Um,
sense.
but of course, there's the downside of not blocking. So yeah, it is a little tricky to play, but I think it's just good overall. It's really nice if you're going first, and Arakni often wants to go first to like eat cards from your opponent's hand. So if your sigil is in your opening hand, then it's sort of like a free life.
Yeah,
So is definitely worth the include overall, and of course good against wizard because you can just go up on life.
yep.
The Heart of Fiendal. So
A
I,
budget
I've
option, right? No.
Yeah, of course. Just pull one out of your local bargain bin and throw it in if you want to test it out, right?
hmm
I've wavered over whether or not to include this. Like I've tested some versions where it's just a three block other blue instead of the heart. Um, so most cards in Flesh and Blood have 3 modes, right? You can either block with it, or you can play it, or you can pitch it to play a different card. Uh, and the legendary or the legendary gems, they all lose 2 of those modes in exchange for potential free value if you use it for the pitch mode.
Yeah,
I think that free value uh, gets better and better the more times you can use it. And in Arachne, you might see your pitch stack, 5 times in a long game, because once you're on second cycle, it's faster to the third cycle, and then it's even faster to the fourth cycle. And then you might have a remembrance to bring back a last ditch effort or something to really close out a game against, say, a guardian.
yeah,
Heart, if you can get that, it goes points of life a few times a game. It really does pay off dividends when it works. I'd probably side it out against extremely aggressive decks where you want to block on hits like 5, for example.
hmm
But it's been overall worth the include. I did run it this past weekend, and I don't know if I can say it won me a few games, but there were some very, very close life point games where that card got me 2 or 3 life. So yeah,
Yep, makes sense. And then Oasis, of course, very powerful with Tunic, also good for Wizard, things like that.
yeah, it's I have 2 of them in the main because I do run it against most matchups. I'd probably take it out for 5, maybe like aggressive dash as well,
hmm
or just like a defensive dash if they're on pistols. The only reason this card works is again because of how broken Tunic is for generating a free resource on your opponent's turn. If Tunic were not in this deck, then Oasis would be completely unplayable because you'd have to pitch from hand for it. But because Tunic is in the deck, every 3 turns you can you can play it out. If you have one kind of early, you can still arsenal it and maybe wait a turn or two. And even if you have to get like the bad value out of it, by pitching a card from hand, maybe it's because you have it in your arsenal and your opponent's kind of CNC you, and then you can pitch a card to Oasis from the arsenal and negate 2 points of that CNC, negate 4 points or maybe 5 points if you gain a life of that CNC, and then they don't really get the on hit effect, and that's still worth your time. I think
Makes sense.
playing this card, if you don't see it early and you have like 3 counters on your tunic, you do want to consider whether or not to use your tunic counter to push a card from your hand, or if you just want to, maybe do 1 fewer dagger attack, and just do like a quick estimate of how likely is it in the next 2 hands or so that I'm gonna have an Oasis. If I've seen 30 cards and I haven't seen Oasis and I have 3 counters on my tunic, I'm probably not using that tunic because I know Oasis is going to be likely to be coming up soon.
Yep, makes
So,
sense.
yeah.
Let's move on to these Rainbow Cut the Chase and almost Rainbow Shreds. So these are
Right.
a lot of
So,
attack reacts for a deck that doesn't run as many attacks. So why the rainbows?
yeah, so the nice thing about the assassin attack reactions is they block 3. So you're going to be blocking a lot, and you just slap them down, and no problem. Like, you never feel bad about blocking with one of these attack reactions. So here's why I run these at Rainbow. So the downside is sometimes you get hands that are just all attack reactions, and then you can't really attack with an attack. And then obviously it's kind of feels bad. I think in this style of deck, it's usually okay, because even if you have you drop at the end of your turn, oh, it's a bunch of attack reactions, I guess I'm blocking this turn, right? So you block a bunch of your opponent's attacks, and then you maybe arsenal the last attack reaction, and you just draw another 4. It's not that bad. The one time it feels really bad is when you have a killer disruptive turn where you landed a surgical extraction, crippled your opponent's whole turn, and then they go, okay, all right, arsenal pass, and then you're like, hell yeah, I just did something good, and then you draw 4, and it's 4 attack reactions, and then all your momentum is gone. Even then, you just dagger twice, arsenal, and move on to the next turn, block again. It's that's the worst case scenario for having this many attack reactions. The best case scenario is your opponent is not expecting you to have 17 attack reactions,
Yeah.
15, 16, a lot of attack reactions,
Something like that, yeah.
plus a pummel. Yeah. So um, it's it's really helpful to just be able to go over and land your on hits, because you need those on hits to fully fatigue your opponent. And cut to the chase, I think. So shred and cut to the chase are both really good. Let's talk about cut to the chase first.
Sure.
Having +3 on your attack is better than -3 on your opponent's block, because a lot of opponents just don't block. And then if you have a bunch of shreds in your hand and your opponent's like, I'll just eat this, leave no witnesses, and lose my arsenal because I have a good 4-card hand, then your shreds are useless and you just kind of wasted a bunch of cards. Cut to the chase always has the value. It also has you get an additional fate seal. Look at the top of your opponent's deck and maybe bottom that if it's not something you want to see on there. If your opponent kind of a niche case, if your opponent commits to a sink below, you can and you have another cut to the chase. You can cut to the chase in response to put the top card on bottom if it's something that you don't want at their hand. So yeah, just a very good card overall. Obviously, the downside compared to shred is that it's 1 point less value if you're trying to get the maximum value out of it. So still, because it blocks 3, just run all of them.
Yep.
The yellow is probably the most the weakest one, because it's a yellow. Probably the first to be replaced if we get better assassin cards in Outsiders. The blue, I have had questions before about why am I running the blue cut to the chase when it's it's only a +1, and most of the time I'm blocking with it or pitching it for a different attack. The reason I have these 3 blues is that yes, I'm blocking most of the time with them, and it is in the early mid game, if I see attacks coming in and I have a blue cut to the chase in my hand and have another blue cut to the chase is almost always the first thing that I block with, and that's fine. You just block with it; it's not a problem. It is good in the late game if you've been pitching it a few times and you still have one in the deck. In the very late game, when your deck is mostly blue and your opponent is also running out of defense reactions because they've been spending all their defense reactions trying to stop your on hits, and then finally at the very end, you come in with it you have this you have maybe your blue cut to the chase in the arsenal. You pitch a blue for a surgical, and your opponent just cannot overcommit to a block because they're just running out of cards. So they block for 4, and then you give the +1, and then you ruin their hand. That's why blue cut to the chase is in here. It is for those late game situations where all you need is to +1 your surgical to just win the game on the spot. So the ceiling for this card, I think, is extremely high. And if you were to replace it for like another 0-for-2 attack, I think you would lose a lot of value out of this deck, just not being able to go over at the very end when you need it the most.
Yeah, so I think the biggest question would be like, why yellow cut to the chase over something like a red Slay the Scholars, for example?
Um, so yellows are tricky because you need to angle your spider bites correctly to get the value out of them.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you like 0-for-4, leave no witnesses, right?
Yeah.
And then your opponent blocks for 6 with 2 cards, and then obviously yellow cuts is useless in that instance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you can only go up to 6. It's good when I think the best use case for it is against Annihilate the Armed. Or when you use it on Annihilate the Armed. If you can dagger, hit the dagger, Annihilate for Armed, and get your opponent to commit to a 6 block, either with 2 non-attack actions or with like 3 attack actions if you're very lucky.
Mm-hmm.
Yellow cuts to the chase, puts that over, and gets that crucial banish that you need to maybe close out the game at the very end. And it's not just for uh, it's, it's not just for like the red annihilate the armed, like blue annihilate because I have so many blue cards, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm often finding myself even in the mid game like attacking with like dagger into blue 1-for-3 or just like a blue 0 for um, 0-for-2, and
Yeah.
it's good in both of those situations because if you 0-for-2 and your opponent just commits a 3 block to it, yellow cuts to the chase, puts that over and gets a banish when you probably otherwise wouldn't have. If you dagger and then 1-for-3 and your opponent commits 2 cards for a 4 block onto it, or just like goes for like a single defense reaction, yellow cuts to the chase, puts that over and gets you your banish. And in games where you don't really care about the life total so much and you just really care about those banishes, being able to go over hits all those check marks. It's also it leaves a question to your opponent. Assuming your opponent doesn't really know what kind of Arakni you're playing, if they see a yellow cut to the chase, they're kind of wondering, all right, is this like the 4th cut to the chase and they're only running 3 reds and 1 yellow, or do they have like all 3 yellows? And it makes your opponent's blocks a lot harder.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I think Slay the Scholars, it hits non-attack actions. It's like okay, maybe you can get silver. I don't think you need that many attacks to make the attacks you do have work. That's why I play yellow cut to the chase. Also, you can just block with it. Blocks for 3, no problem. Just get it out of your hand. The other attack reaction, Shred. So I think blue and yellow shreds are superb. Blue, because it's a blue, that still gives you 2 value on a reaction. That's like super good.
Mm-hmm.
Yellows, because it gets the full 3 against a normal blocking card. The 1 red, I don't run 3 reds because I see like the 1 red as like the 4th yellow that doesn't pitch for as much. It's just so in practice it's so rare to get that full 4 value against a defense reaction. And having that many res in your deck just makes your pitches kind of awkward. So I want a little bit more attack reaction capacity. And sometimes if you show the red shred, maybe your opponent will think, oh, maybe he's running 3 red shreds because that's a kind of a natural assumption. So that's a sort of a bluff value there. But in practice, it's mostly just for being an extra yellow shred that only pitches for 1. Also, one note on a previous card we talked about, Sigil of Solace for gaining 3 life. It's not just like a great for gaining life as most fatigue decks like to do, but because it's instant, it's fantastic for bluffing that you have an attack reaction. If you have like 3 cards in hand and no arsenal, and you're just 0-for-4 attack, and you have 2 cards, it could be 2 attack reactions, and your opponent like really doesn't want that leave no witnesses to hit, so they have to overblock, or it could be 1 attack reaction and an arsenal card, or it could just be a Sigil of Solace and then you arsenal your other card, and your opponent overblocks for no reason,
Mm-hmm.
even though you didn't have an attack reaction. So being able to just say, sorry, it wasn't an attack reaction, I just gained 3 life now. It's like a huge swing when your opponent overblocks on something important like a leave no witnesses.
Makes sense. Makes sense. All right, so I was gonna touch on some cards we didn't run or what cards we would run, but we kind of touched on that as we were talking about all the cards. So let's just quickly go into the sideboard. You talked
Actually,
already.
there's a few more in the blues. I think we
That's
we haven't
right.
gone
You have
over.
like last ditch
Yeah.
effort.
Yeah. So well, first the attacks. So right now in this list, I have a 2 Fleece the Frail, 2 Rob the Rich, 1 Slay the Scholars is kind of like the loose extra blues, and then 3 Plunder the Poors and 3 Annihilate the Armed. So the blue Plunder the Poor and Annihilate the Armed, because I think they're the best common rare assassin attacks.
Yeah.
Still leave those in. But the other ones, I think you can just kind of run whatever. Maybe probably Slay the Scholars is the best out of those. So maybe I would cut 2 Fleece the Frail for 2 more Slay the Scholars. Rather Rich is like kind of okay. Maybe you can get value against the Guardian out of it in late game. Probably not. So I think having a good mix of a 1 for 3 and 0 for 2 in the blues is good, because if you have 2 blues in your hand, pitching for a dagger into a 1 for 3 is much better than just going for a dagger into 0 for 2, because then your opponent's attack actions only block for 2, and you can go over with a 1 for 3, so it still makes things awkward for them.
Yeah. And then the last blue, last ditch effort.
Yeah, last ditch effort. This card is nuts. I was running like Pursuit of Knowledge before this, and that was pretty bad. Only blocks 2, and you rarely get the 5 intellect value out of it. Last ditch effort. Oh, this card has won me so many games against Guardians.
Yeah.
You do want to cycle it a lot, and against Guardians, you're probably going to bring in the Remembrance from the sideboard, so you can even do it multiple times. Also, if you have to block with it early, you can bring it back later. Against fatigue, very long fatigue games against Guardians, against Dorinthea, you will almost guaranteed play this card at some point. And if you can have enough of a a life advantage
buffer?
where where this last ditch effort actually makes them like block with their whole hand because they need the life, then this will just win games for you. I think also like the only other hero that sometimes runs this card is is Bravo, and like maybe Lexi as a one of, but Arakni uses it better than either of those two because of the existence of silver tokens. It's pretty common, like maybe about half the time, you're going to have 1 silver left at the end of the game, and you have no way of generating additional silver, so you're not going to be bringing back armor, right?
Yeah.
So let's say you have 5 cards left in your deck, you draw 5, you dagger, right? Land the dagger, and then you pop the silver to draw the last card. That enables your last ditch effort that your opponent was not expecting at all to be live. You come in for 8 go again, and then you ruin their whole day. Obviously, against an extremely skilled opponent that has been tracking your last ditch efforts and knows about silver, it's probably not going to be as effective. But just even if forgetting about the blocking value, just being able to last ditch off of a 5 card library instead of a 4 card one makes this way more 25% more effective, right? Because instead of needing to be at a 4 or 3 or something, you can just go off of 5. So there have been times where I've left 2 silvers on board and not brought back an armor, just because I want to be able to last ditch and I have 6 cards left. So yeah, this card is super good in Arakni.
Wow, yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
Never thought about that silver play.
Right. So yeah, silver is great. Yeah, silver token, when you use it for its intended purpose, sometimes can just win you the game right there. One note about Remembrance that I do have in the sideboard. So I bring this in against like pretty much every really long matchup. But when you're bringing back cards, I think since you're going to see 2 of them, I would try to play one in the mid game if you can to get back some reds against Guardian or Dorinthea, so that you can do a little bit more life pressure in the mid game. And then late game is when you want to be bringing back your last ditch or surgical. And depending on the status of your your comparative deck sizes and your comparative life totals, the last Remembrance you're going to bring back some combination probably of last ditch effort and surgical extraction. If you think you can kill them, right the hell now, you'd probably bring back 2 last ditch efforts and a surgical. If your opponent, if you want to, it has a healthy life lead, but like a poor hand and deck size, surgical is probably a better thing to bring back because they're probably out of armor at that point. They need to block with 2 cards or like an unmovable or something. And landing a surgical is the way to just rip out your opponent's entire hand and fully fatigue them so that they can't do anything. Then you can just dagger them to death with 1 card. So yeah, that's there's a little bit of nuance in how you play that Remembrance against the long matchups.
Makes sense. And you also use it for Warhorn, I assume, versus Iyslander?
Yeah, so Remembrance, fatigue matchups and also Iyslander. So let's talk about this Warhorn, I guess. Card is really good against Iyslander. I think it's the only reason why the Iyslander matchup is even remotely winnable against a good Iyslander is that you can, if you have an early Warhorn, you can blow up a Frost Hex and one of their items. If you get lucky, like I did yesterday against Caleb in the finals, you get it when they only have 2 Insidious Chills out, and both of them have 3 counters on them, and you just blow up the Insidious with 3 counters to get incredible value out of that Warhorn. But Remembrance, it's also yellow, so you can pitch against Iyslander for AB, and you can bring back that Warhorn. So yeah, that's when I would bring in the 2 Remembrances.
Yep. You have a third Oasis. We talked about the unmovables for Guardian. Epots, I also assume, is for Iyslander.
Yeah, it's pretty much just for Iyslander. And Kano, I guess, because you can do a little bit more AB on their kill turn. Against Iyslander, I normally play it very passive, like try to Warhorn, and because my deck, the way it's built, just doesn't have enough damage output to kill them before they can triple Frost X you. So play it very passive and preserve life total, and then try to get the Warhorns out to try to blow up Frost X's. And if you can, even if they bring in 70 cards, you can exhaust their whole deck, and then you can just dagger to the finish.
Yep. I was gonna say, would you even consider like purposefully going below Icelander's life so they get less value on if they're running things like
Yeah,
Scar,
I've definitely
Wounded Bull?
thought about it. So like I think like if you do get knocked below their life total early, it might be worth staying below that life total. The only problem with that is that you need to play your reds to get them out of your deck so that your deck is mostly blues in the late game.
Yeah.
And the only way to do that is to attack.
Makes
And
sense.
then a lot of them, like if the attack lands, their life total is probably going against yours. So it's kind of hard to actually actively keep your life below theirs if you're attacking. And like if your life is significantly below theirs, they're probably not going to block as much. And the other reason for having to attack is that you need to be able to eat cards from their hand to when they block. Otherwise, they can do whatever they want and set up on you, and you don't cycle as many cards out from your hand if you're too passive. So you don't get to see your Warhorn as early, and then you're going to lose that way. So yeah, it's a tricky matchup. Oh, and the one other matchup in which I would use Warhorn is maybe the extremely defensive dash if they're just just on a bunch of D-reacts and a bunch of blues and pistol, and they're trying to set up the pistol combo.
Yeah.
Warhorn might be good there. I think you would have to scout it out first. I would not use it against hybrid dash or aggro dash. It's a pretty dead card there, so
Yeah.
you'd have to know that your opponent is on the turtle dash.
Makes sense. And then lastly, we have like this one erase face. This comes in probably for like what, aggro dash, maybe Fi.
Dash for sure because it stops all variants of dash. Viserai because it shuts him down. Fi is it's a solid maybe. It only blocks for 2, but sometimes turning Draconic off is good. Maybe against Briar. Usually against Briar, I'm playing pretty defensively and trying to fatigue. So the block 2 is like not as good, but you can, if you're lucky with it, you can turn off some things. And it's also a popper for Dromai. So my general opinion on the Dromai Dragon matchup is the way I have my deck set up. The matchup is completely unwinnable against a good Dromai. And even with if I like added some more poppers and have all the remembrances, it would still be really bad. So I think with Flesh and Blood, the current meta being as wide as it is, there's no way you can try to prepare for everything. So you should just accept that there are some matchups that you should just sacrifice. For Arakni, that's unfortunately a lot of matchups.
Yeah.
But Dromai is like definitely one of the worst of them. So like I don't even bother with Dromai. Like my plan against Dragon Dromai is just not get paired up against them. So if you do come against Dromai, yeah, you can bring that in. I think Erase Ace is probably one of the earliest things to cut from the sideboard if you need a slot for something else.
Hearing you talk about that gives me like PTSD from my Bravo versus Prism days. It's just like,
yeah, exactly. Like it's okay, it's hopeless. So might as well not even put stuff in the sideboard for it, right?
Basically.
Just hope you dodge. Right, and then the rest of the equipment. So AB3 suite for Iyslander and Kano. AB4 is probably not very useful when you need to because the only thing AB4 really hits is yellow Ether Ice Vein, which is kind of niche. Probably not worth a slot, especially since you'd have to give up your Mask of Perdition probably, and Mask of Perdition is still pretty good against Iyslander. Arcanite Skullcap. So this is something I was testing against Fi. I brought it in on Saturday, lost that game. I think it's probably not worth a sideboard slot. It did get the full 3 block value, But if I had run Mask of Perdition instead, because fives don't block very much, it's very
Yeah.
easy to get more silver. And then if you generate an extra 2 or 3 silver off of Mask of Perdition, then that's another 1 or 2 life anyways.
Yeah.
So it's not worth a sideboard slot. I'd probably cut it for another That All You Got, because That All You Got is not only good against aggro matchups, but also it's good against tall matchups where you can arsenal it for dominate, or against Dory, having just another D react is really good. So.
Yeah, I thought maybe you had this in so you could like AB6 versus Iyslander, but
Yes, by the time you're below Icelander's life total, it's AB6 is not going to save you.
yeah,
You're
makes
gonna
sense.
take 18 from Frost Hexes or something. So yeah.
Makes sense. All right, yeah, and that covers the deck basically. Just off the top of your head, are there any notable inclusions that you considered and might consider adding back in or adding in?
So there are a few things like I think some people. So we talked about the other assassin attacks, and I gave my logic for those.
Yeah.
There are also like a lot of generic cards like Razor Reflex, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and like Nimblism, which would buff your attacks. I
Yeah.
think both of those are not good because when you're trying to fatigue, blocking 2 is really bad. You really want to limit the amount of 2 blocks you have in the deck. And Razor also costs 1, and it's essentially cut to the chase. But
Blocks 2.
uh, but it blocks 2. It costs 1. Also, the go again on hit, like it's often pretty irrelevant if you're if you if you don't have a ton of cards in hand. So
Yeah.
with the style I'm playing, like you don't have a ton of cards in hand. Razor's useless. And the other thing is like generic attacks like Scar for a Scar, or like Fiendal's Fighting Spirit, or Enlightened Strike. So Fighting Spirit, I think, is probably the strongest to include if you want to try something else. If you like, if your meta is heavy with the Dromais, maybe having some red Fiendal's Fighting Spirits to pop, and also you can use it as a block. That can gain you life against aggro decks. If you block 2 and you gain a life, you sort of got extra value out of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also attacking with it, you can gain a life. So the Iyslander Classic. So it's not a bad card at all. It's certainly worth considering. I think E-Strike, Scar for Scar, probably are really bad.
Really
Scar
bad.
only block, yeah, really bad. Scar only blocks 2.
Yeah.
Like 4 vanilla damage is like so useless in this deck.
Makes
E-Strike, uh, I think the only strong thing you can say about E-Strike in this deck is that it blocks 3. Coming in for 5 go again on a wide hand, it's not really where you want to be, because it's just generic damage that doesn't disrupt. And if you want to, try to keep up with your opponent in damage, you should not be playing Arakni. You should be playing a hero that does a lot of damage with their cards. Like Arakni's card pool is just not built for dealing damage.
Mm-hmm.
It is built for this fatigue style. I don't think aggro Arakni can really flourish in an environment where other heroes just have built-in damage, right? Arachne's hero ability, it doesn't have anything to do with damage whatsoever. His cards don't really do damage on their face text. So if you want to do damage, play a different hero. Yeah.
Makes sense. All right. And then last up, let's go quickly, or as quickly as we'll go, into a little matchup tier list. So let's start off with like the aggro decks, like like Briar, even yeah, I mean that's mainly I guess Dash to an extent sometimes. Yeah, how do you feel about these aggro matchups in general?
Okay. Yeah, so I like how you have arranged these tiers. So
Mm-hmm.
the matchups that are really good. I think unfortunately for Arachne, they're quite few. There is a reason that this guy is bottom of most tier lists in the overall meta. Barely has any LL points. Like his overall matchups against the field tend to be pretty weak overall. So let's talk about Fi. I would put him in unfavored.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even heavily unfavored. I don't think it's an automatic loss.
Yeah.
Unlike the general attitude towards Fi from defensive decks is that you cannot block him out, and it's true. Like you cannot, even if you block with every single card in your hand every turn, you cannot block him out. He will be able to punch through. And this is one of the reasons why he's the premier aggro deck against decks like Oldhim, where like Oldhim's most of them don't try to fully fatigue Fi. They try to go for like aggro disruption.
Stalagmite,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, running Stalagmite instead of Rampart, just because they need that disruption, because you cannot fully fatigue Fi. However, Arachne can fully fatigue Fi because of the banish effects, right?
Okay. Okay. Yep.
If you block with 3 cards and you 0 for 4, banish a card off the top, or if you like Tunic for an Eradicate and they don't respect it, you can actually fatigue him. I think there's also good value in from the Arakni trigger, where you look at the top card. putting power cards to the bottom is really valuable. Like bottoming an Artivore sometimes is as good as banishing it, because the only way they're going to see that back in a reasonable time frame is by shuffling with Belittle. But if they don't manage to do that, the Art of War comes really late, like a late game Art of War where they're drawing into 2 blues is a really weak Art of War, and it's much better that you see the Art of War then than as compared to like early on in the game where they're like drawing into reds into another Art of War, and then you go again, and you're just in big trouble from these massive wide turns. So it is possible to fully fatigue Fi. I have done a few times in testing, but still overall, just Fi just presents so much damage up front. He's very hard to block, and if you try to get greedy with what you can do with your own turn, he's going to punish you with like a lava burst into snaps into Mask of the Passing Links into another lava burst. So overall, I think this is a very bad matchup.
Just one quick thing to touch on: if you're playing against Fi, are you more worried about Mask of the Pouncing Links or Mask of Momentum?
I think my personal opinion is that Fi should run links, or most Fi should. Maybe if your deck is like built around momentum, then it's okay. But links, because Arakni still blocks pretty efficiently, and if I see Mask of Momentum, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be stopping your chain links. And it's not like Katsu where you have a ton of ways to go over against perfect blocks. Like if Fi presents 3 on the second chain link and I block for 3, it's probably not going to go over, right?
Yeah.
So it's pretty easy for Arakni to stop the links, or sorry, the Mask of Momentum activations, but links always is going to get you 5 at some point, and 5 damage is 5 damage,
Yeah, or 6 or 7 with
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I if I were Fi, I would run links. Yeah.
All right, and then for Briar, probably also tough, right? Because they have their heroic turns.
Yeah. So like if we're splitting this into like a 50-50 and then just like slightly unfavored and then go next, I would actually put Fi in the go next, because like I'd say that's heavily unfavored. Briar would be in like slightly unfavored.
Yeah.
So Briar still goes pretty wide, but Arakni's trigger does a lot of work here. Putting blues on top for like Ravenous Rabble, for example, is really good. Bottoming Channel Mount Heroic, because most Briars don't run as many belittles as Fis do, so they don't have as many shuffle effects. If you bottom a CMH, by the time they see it again, it's really bad. They're going to be like CMH into like a blue
Autumn's touch.
or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's way less threatening if you like the instant you see a Channel Mount Heroic, you put it right to the bottom, and you feel a lot better about it. And yeah, that sort of deck manipulation is pretty good. Briars, if they're trying to set up a CMH and then like you block with 3 cards and you leave no witnesses them, then it can be pretty disruptive, and they still don't want to block, so maybe they lose their arsenal. Against Briar, I'd probably run AB2, like lose the Goliath Gauntlets for gloves and lose a dagger for the Arcane Lantern, and then just try to block them out, be disruptive, and get those Arakni triggers to see their top, and try to manipulate the top as best as you can.
Yeah, so basically against aggro, it's like it's not just pure fatigue. You want a mixture of disruption and fatigue, because ultimately that's what'll get you there.
Yeah. Also for Briar, so Briar will probably bring in anywhere from like 60 to maybe 65 cards. They don't want to go too far over against Arakni, because they still want to kill fast. But when you get down to like the very end game, because you're blocking with a lot of cards from hand, against Briar, I think it's worth bringing in 1 Remembrance as your 61st card. Or your 62nd or 63rd card. The Remembrance, unlike against Fi, where it's completely dead, Remembrance can AB2 in the early game. So you do get some sort of blocking value out of it. But in the late game, Briar, because Rosetta is so efficient at dealing damage, you will often find times where you have to block block a card for the physical against Rosetta and then like AB2, and you can run out of cards pretty fast that way. If you're trying to block out most of their turns. So there have been times when I'm running really low on cards in my deck. So having 1 Remembrance in the end game to just bring back a couple blues, and maybe maybe your last ditch, and some surgicals. Surgical especially, because if Briar has you down on life and they're like a really high life because you haven't been attacking them very much, you're going to need surgical to rip the last 2 cards out of their hand or something. So bringing back 2 surgicals and a last ditch can really do a lot there.
Okay, and then let's move on to Dash, because Dash is kind of like mid-range or
Dash
aggro
is
for the most part.
Right, Dash is like 3 different decks, right? You could
Yeah.
be like a heavy boost plan, like there was one dash I eliminated from the finals twice this last weekend, and he was on like the boost Hanabi plan, and his sideboard didn't even have like the
Pistols and stuff.
the red items. Yeah, so
Yeah.
like he didn't have the full pistol setup, so he had to be on the Hanabi boost plan, and that I would call a buy.
Wow.
Where if they're boosting, like they're doing their job for you, right? If that
73
deck,
card boost.
yeah, exactly. He was at like way over 60 cards. It didn't even matter.
Mhm.
If you're incredibly aggressive with dash, you can still even punch through the guardians, like even against Oldhim, if you Hanabi enough, that's like free damage, and you can still punch through and kill Oldhim. But you cannot do the same to Arakni, because Arakni is gonna block with 3 cards. He's gonna 0 for you, and the banish cards from the top. Every time you boost, that is your life burning away, and
Mhm.
Arakni is just gonna make that even faster. Arakni doesn't have to do damage against boost dash. Just block out a bunch, and then occasionally banish, and then free win. So I think boost like the pure boost dash is as close to a buy as you can get. The on the other end of the spectrum, the uh, like the extremely defensive item dash, probably a go next.
It's very,
Yeah,
very different.
like
Yeah.
if because that setup is designed for killing guardians, right? Super
Yeah.
defensive, turbo out all your items. They can get your items out really fast before, and because they have so many defense reactions, it's really hard for you to go over with your attack reactions to banish.
Yeah.
So my playstyle against that would probably be to put as many reds to the bottom as possible, but the super defensive dash doesn't have that many reds, and they're going to be tutoring out items with Spark of Genius, and they're going to be drawing into some of their items naturally. So it's very hard to kill that. I'd bring in probably 2 Remembrance and a Warhorn if I knew that they were on that. But even so, I don't think it's enough, because Warhorn is like 2 action points to blow up 1 item out of potentially 6, and if you have to spend your action points on that, you're not attacking for banish, and they can spend all their blues in the hand to like load all their items and threaten you for a bunch of damage. I think that matchup is pretty hopeless. And then in the middle, probably somewhere around 50-50 is the hybrid dash, where they're mainly on a boost plan, but they also have like 6 items or 5 items or something in the sideboard, and bring in with a pistol, and they can try to do it that way. The problem is, even if they bring in 70 cards, they still have a ton of reds in their deck, and that's going to disrupt their ability to load their items. And the best thing you can do against that plan is every time you see a red on top, you just put it on the bottom for second cycle, because they're banking on getting all the reds out of their deck in the first cycle, so that they can like get into all their blues, and they can load all their items really easily. But then when they're drawing a hand, it's in the very late game, and it's still like 2 reds and 2 blues. They're like, "What the heck is happening?" It's because I've been bottoming all your reds. And every time you see a blue on top, I leave it on top so that you have the chance to just banish it. And if you're banishing blues and you keep like the red-blue ratio in their deck, it's very disruptive. And they also, if they're trying to set up items on a hybrid plan, they're probably not pushing very much damage. So you want to be the aggressor in that hybrid matchup, where you want to try to go for the good banishes, and then just kill them with damage before they can set up the bunch of items. And of course, if you do manage to luckily banish some items, that's a good thing too. Yesterday, in the semis, I was playing against a hybrid dash, and I banished. I had a good eradicate that banished a plasma purifier and an induction chamber, and that was
Oh,
like basically the GG. Yeah.
wow.
So
Just hit.
yeah, exactly, just hit. So anyway, dash is anywhere between a buy, a 50-50, and a go next.
Okay, so I'll just leave her in the 50-50 because
Yeah,
it's like
I'd say
a
the
nice
hybrid
mix.
dash is 50-50, because hybrid dash is by far the most common, I think.
Yeah.
Most people are going to be on some sort of boost plan, and then bringing in items for the fatigue matchup. So I would call it a 50-50. Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to the Wizards, Iyslander and Kano. How do you feel about these two?
So let's start with Iyslander, one of the most popular decks in the meta at the moment. I'd probably put this in go next.
Mhm.
Um,
But you won against
sorry.
Caleb in the finals.
Right. So okay, let me. Sorry, no shade on Caleb. He was kind of inexperienced against Arakni. Also, I mega high rolled that game. Like I had he was going first, but he didn't have any items set up. I had 2 sigils in my opening hand, so I just gained 6 life immediately. I had a very fast Warhorn where I just blew up a Frost Hex and a 3 counter Insidious. And also my first Leave No Witnesses banished 3 reds with the Mask of Perdition. So yeah, it
Oh,
was just absolute high roll from my end. Very unfortunate for him. Overall, though, I think this matchup is like so with the caveat that everything I'm saying here for this matchup tier list is based on an extremely skilled opponent on the other end of the table that
Equally
knows how to
skilled,
play against
maybe like
against
equally skilled.
Arachne. No,
Is
extremely
good.
skilled.
Extremely skilled.
No,
So they have to be
extremely skilled.
better than you.
They have to be better, exactly.
Okay.
Assuming this is like a top player on the other end of the table who knows and is experienced in the Arachne matchup. I did win a lot of games because my opponents
Don't know. Yeah.
don't know how to play against Arakni because nobody plays Arachne, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody thinks Arachne's bad. Okay, all right. You bring in in any sort of game when you bring in a rogue hero, I'm gonna have much more experience against your hero than you are against my hero, right? So
Yes.
that's a few points of advantage. But obviously, if you're getting to the top tables of a big event, that advantage is gonna dwindle more and more and more, and you're gonna be playing against people who actually know what they're doing. So that's how I'm gonna judge this. All the heroes on this tier list. So
Yeah.
that's why I think Iyslander is a go next. There is pretty much no way for the cards in my deck to push through 36 damage, especially when they have like Heart of Fiandal and Fighting Spirit to gain more life. I cannot push enough damage to kill Iyslander before she sets up 3 Frost Hexes. So yes, if you get really lucky and you banish Frost Hexes off the top and Ice Eternals off the top, you can sometimes steal a win that way. But it's really marginal, and especially since if you're trying to do something risky like leave a Frost Hex on top because you have a bunch of attack reactions, and then they just like cold snap you from Arsenal and draw into it, and they're like, oh, a Frost Hex, all right, I'm gonna land this Frost Hex, then you're fucked, right? So Iyslander, I think, can very easily set up if they know how to block and they have the appropriate defense reactions against your key cards, and then when they have all out the Insidious and the Amulets and maybe the E-Pots to combo kill you, there's not really much you can do. Like against an inexperienced Iyslander, you might stick out 2 of your own E-Pots and then like float from Tunic, and then maybe you have a Sigil in the arsenal. Then you can spend the 6 resources to play the Sigil through your Frostbites, and then you pop the Frostbites. Ooh, I stole a win this way. That doesn't happen against a good Iyslander who knows how to count how many resources you have. They're just gonna like 2 E-Pots. I'm gonna use my own Tunic, pitch 3 cards, or X equals 7, and then like, oh, I have 6 floating. Too bad.
Yeah.
So, and that's after, of course, they stripped your hand the previous turn by fusing, and they had like Insidious triggers and Amulet. There's just nothing you can do about that. So that's why I think Iyslander is really bad. The only hope is if you get an early Warhorn, you break a Frost Hex, and then you don't necessarily have to remembrance it back and do it a second time after that, but it really does help if you can get 2 Frost Hexes. I also think that in the past like week or so, Fatigue Oldhim with Warhorn has also put up some results. And if Oldhims start adapting into Warhorn, I think it's reasonably possible that Icelanders will start adapting by maybe running a Remembrance in the side to bring back their Frost Hexes and Ice Eternals.
Yeah.
If they do that, then it's really hopeless, and there's no way.
One thing I wanted to say was that this is a bit of a caveat, right? Because it feels like in the Iyslander matchup, or in a lot of these matchups, really, when you're playing a fatigue deck, you kind of put the onus on your opponent to beat you rather than the other way around.
Absolutely.
And,
so my record on Talishar against Iyslander is 18-3, right? So like the Iyslander is like the hero with a huge, absolutely massive gap between the top skilled players and the average player. And lots of pros love her because she's such a high skill ceiling hero. But I don't think if you're playing in a competitive event, you shouldn't come with the expectation that, oh, my opponent's a scrub and it doesn't know how to play against Arakni. You should be prepared that your opponent is a competent player, and competent Icelanders are extremely scary for Arakni because I just can't kill her before she gets the wombo combo. So.
Would the same basically be said for Kano? Like they can just pitch stack like some double tome into blazing, etc.
I think so. Kano, like what you just said about the onus is on them to kill you. Between Kano and Arakni, there's a lot more like back and forth about the Arakni trigger. So
true, because you can mess up their pitch stack.
Right, you can mess up their pitch stack, but also they can use that to their advantage. Like if you leave a bad blue on top, then they can just wait until their turn to do stuff and like play cards from hand. If you like bottom a cards because you're trying to banish, then they can like Kano in response and maybe see something good. And they get a lot of opting from their damage cards and all, like Cindering Foresight and so on. And they can control their pitch stack pretty well. Like Arakni does disrupt the pitch stack, but against Kano, a lot of it comes down to like the little bit of mind games between the Arakni trigger and also a little bit of luck in when you get your Oasis
Yeah.
Oasis respites. If you have like all 3 Oasis really early, and you kind of need to get them out of your hand so you can do stuff, then it's pretty bad because you can't control the 3rd Ether Wildfire as well.
Hmm.
If you see it really late and it's on time with the 3rd Ether Wildfire, then it's really good. So against Kano, I'd play still pretty defensively. Try to hold up some AV with your blues. Play out your reds. The dagger doesn't really do anything in that matchup at all. So
Yeah.
usually, you don't bother attacking with dagger, and then you just try to swing and eat cards from their hand and get as many Arakni triggers as you can to mess up their pitch stack.
That
Um,
makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, one more nuance with the Kano matchup is that some of them have been running Imperial Edict. I know a lot of them cut them from their list because it's not good against fast matchups at all. But
Hmm.
if they are playing Edict and they pop it, they name Oasis, and you can't Oasis on your return, and then they have the Wildfire in Arsenal, and they're like, all right, Stormstrider's Ether Wildfire, you can't play your Oasis, then you should. There's nothing you can do against that if they have the stack. So
Yeah.
yeah. Hope for some lucky banishes. Maybe you can banish a Wildfire off the top to release some pressure. But I'd probably have to play it more to understand that matchup. For now, I think 50-50 is pretty reasonable. Maybe like leaning towards unfavored, but it doesn't feel like completely lopsided in either direction. So
Yeah. Oh, one other deck I didn't touch on was Katsu when we were talking about aggro. How do you feel there?
yeah, so I used to play Katsu a lot,
Yes.
and Katsu is also very tricky. So initially he kind of Arakni kind of seemed sort of like Katsu with like the daggers and then like the
Hmm.
attacks and the attack reactions, but in practice it doesn't play out that way at all. Arakni's definitely a very defensive. Katsu is usually very aggro. The most popular style right now is with the cat tiger
The
combo,
kitty
so the
cat. Yep.
Katsu, yeah, the
Hmm.
Katsu deck. I think one of the reasons I stopped playing Katsu is that the cat stuff didn't really change or didn't really fix any of the existing problems he had.
Nope.
Where if he gets blocked out and he doesn't get his hit triggers, then he just loses, right? You need to hit to enable the Katsu discards and also get your combo pieces together and also your Mask of Momentum. And if you can't do that, then your cards are below rate. So your cards are only above rate if you get the full combo lines together. I would probably say 50-50 for Katsu.
Hmm.
Especially like the tire variant, because so the advantages going for Katsu are that like Art of War turns can still be really big and it's still hard to block out fully,
Hmm.
and he does have a lot of little attack reaction tricks. Ancestral
Yeah.
and Razor, and also of course Breaking Scales always being available to just go over by 1 point makes the blocking very difficult. To play against him, I think I would try to block for perfect amount as much as possible early on to force the
The
Breaking
breaking
Scales.
skills.
Like if you have to like perfect block a 3rd chain link early on, and they Breaking Scales and then get a mass trigger, I'd still say it's probably worth it. And if you have the D-react, you probably D-react to overblock by 3 anyways
Hmm.
to stop the mass trigger, because just getting rid of that on hit and getting rid of that always present Breaking Scales makes them have way less juice to go over, and it makes you feel way more confident about blocking for the perfect later. So Katsu's still an aggro ninja deck, can go really wide, present a lot of damage, and have big Art of War turns. That makes it difficult to defend fully against. The advantages for Arakni compared to Fi is that Katsu runs out of cards a lot faster.
Yeah.
Every Katsu trigger is like you discard your search. All right, you're doing Arakni's job for him. Easier to banish. Katsu also doesn't block very well. His armor, I think, is worse than in the Fi's because Fi has like 5 blocking armor just off the chest and arms, whereas Katsu, most of them are running Snapdragons. Breaking Skills only blocks for 1, and then their chest is either going to be it's probably going to be Tunic against Arakni, so that only blocks for 1 in late game. And their Mask, they really don't want to block with that, so blocking is much harder for him, so it's much easier to land those banishes.
Yep. Makes sense. Yeah, I figured that maybe with his own like self discard mechanic when he tutors, it might be a little favored because he thins himself,
Mhm.
kind of similar to Dash, but less so. But
I'd probably have to play like a lot more games against highly competitive Katsus to figure this out more.
yeah, too
I think
bad there aren't too
50-50
many
is
of
like
them.
yeah, same problem with Arakni. There's not too many
Yeah.
top Araknis running around to practice against.
Yeah.
And yeah, with Katsu, like most most top competitive players will see Katsu and like, well, might as well just play Fi instead because it's more consistent damage.
All right, let's move on to the Rangers. You probably don't have too much Azalea practice, but
I do actually. There, for some
you
reason, there's
do?
been a lot of Azaleas in my armories. Some of them are pretty good, and there were I played against like 2 Azaleas at my first ProQuest the previous week. Yeah, a lot of Azaleas running around, and of course some Talishar practice. Azalea is a buy.
As she is.
She's like, the best she can do is like what is it?
Dominate.
Red and Ledger, or not Red and Ledger. Remorseless, like stop the D-react from Arsenal if you have a D-react in Arsenal. But she only has so many arrows, and she also doesn't block well. So if you 0 for 4 her, it's like, oh, there's another arrow off the top. Bye bye. And also, if you do get dagger turns, like the only way she can block your own hits efficiently is by blocking with her non-attack actions, right? But that's how she gets damage, right? So like then she has to 1 for 5 a regular arrow with no dominate. It's like, okay, I'll just block with 2 cards, no problem. And if she brings in 70 cards, she's gonna run out of arrows before I run out of life. I don't see a way for Azalea to meaningfully go over a defensive Arakni.
Okay. And what about for Lexi?
Also a buy.
Also a buy. Same fatigue plant, and they just don't got enough arrows, right?
They do not have enough arrows, even with the last ditch. Lexi, I think, like they're gonna have like 1 wombo combo, Art of War into
Rain Razors,
Rain Razors, 3 of a kind into like Bullseye Bracers, like a Boltyn shot, like 5 arrows. And you're gonna block with your whole hand. Is gonna deal 20 damage. You're like, oh, okay, I got like 5 frostbites. All right, and that hurts a lot. But then she's not going to do it again because you're going to have enough, you're going to have enough Arakni triggers to be disrupting those turns. She only has so many arrows. You block out all the arrows. There's not much you can do. Against both Rangers, I bring in like the 3rd Oasis, and against Azalea for sure, bringing the unmovable. Not against Lexi, but I would bring in that all you got. And just like block as much as possible. Have something in the arsenal. Save your tunic triggers for like against Lexi, since she ices you. Revealing the ice card is part of the cost, so you can respond by floating 1 off a tunic, and then you can use that 1 to pay for a defense reaction, so that blocks pretty cleanly. Or you can, if she doesn't flip an ice, then you can use that 1 floating to pay for tunic, or sorry, to pay for Oasis. And it's okay to, like, if she has like extra ice cards, or like plays a Frostlock, or like a channel like Frigid, it's okay to like pitch a blue to play out like a 2 D-reacts, or a D-react and an Oasis, just to prevent those on hits. And if you have to block out every single turn for the entire game, she still doesn't have enough arrows to kill you. So I just don't see how I just don't see a way with the current Lexi setup for her to kill Arakni before running out of cards.
Makes sense. All right, let's move on to the Dromai. I assume this is another the most definite go next, probably, right?
Yes, for sure.
Like
so Dromai, so there are 2 variants right now. The less popular one is the Iris Dromai, which runs a lot of auras. I think that one's closer to favored, or like favored 50-50-ish, because it's pretty easy to run that amount of cards, right? You just like dagger their auras, and then you block out their regular attacks, and they run out of stuff, and there's not much they can do about it. Dragon Dromai, the much more popular variant, is nearly an auto loss, especially again under the assumption that the opponent knows what they're doing against Arakni, and what they're going to be doing is building up some ash, like playing out the Necria early, so you have to like dagger attack the Necria to kill it, and they get 3 ash out of that, and then they're going to have a turn where they go like Chromai into Mirror Guy into like an Uvia, and then they're just going to attack with a Chromai, and then they're going to leave that, and then they're going to attack with an Ashwing, and then they're not going to attack with the Uvia, of course, because they're not going to risk the popper, and then you have to like kill 2 dragons, and then the Uvia is going to be a problem for like 5 turns, and you have to just commit to attacking the Uvia, and you're going to have an awful time of it. If they just like play 1 dragon a turn, then you can just dagger and kill the dragon and run them out of cards in their deck. But that's not going to happen against a competent Dromai that just has the turn where they shit out 3 dragons. And you also cannot race them, because if you try to go face, they can respond by just taking damage and then playing dragons. And then you have to spend your turns killing dragons, because the instant you leave a dragon alone, there's going to be another dragon, and then you have to kill 2 dragons, and you can't do it. It's not
just
possible.
Compounds. Yep.
Yeah. And none of the cards in your deck, because I'm not running Razor, right? Razor would be able to give you go again, or if you run E-Strikes, I guess you can E-Strike go again with a wide hand. But none of the decks cards in my deck give go again when you hit a dragon. So you have to like dagger. You have to hope to be able to kill a Kylorio or a Chromai with 2 daggers, and then use a card to kill a different dragon if there's like 2 dragons out. That's why like Azalea and even Thamai are just really dangerous because of that high health on those dragons, and you have to commit cards to them. And if they play 2 dragons a turn, you're in big trouble. Like Yenderai also a big problem where you have to dagger away the endurance counter and then probably commit a 0 for 4 to killing the life total or the health on that dragon. So yeah, it's just really hard.
Does black type only work when you hit a hero?
Yeah, it's only when you. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
They learned from Ninja, where all the Ninja triggers are like when you hit,
Yeah.
free stuff happens, and then Dromai has a bad time. Right. Well, like back when I played Katsu, I was always hoping for as many Dromais as possible because free masking momentum triggers makes the matchup a lot easier. But with Arakni, it's kind of the opposite. You don't get triggers when you hit dragons. So I don't think it's winnable with a competent Dromai. Even if you run like a bunch of poppers in your side, they're going to have Miragai and Passing Mirage, and they're going to be treating it like a Guardian matchup where they can they can Mage Master boost a Passing Mirage and then play a dragon and attack with a dragon with no Phasm, and then on your turn you have a full grip. It's like, well, maybe I use this 6 power attack to attack the dragon because that's what it takes to kill an Uvia, and then there's nothing you can do anyways. So it's just really bad.
All right. Moving on to the Warriors, how do you feel about Boltyn? If they go Sabers, I assume that's kind of tough for you because they just get like a double triple Lumina combo, and well, maybe that's not enough though. What do you think?
Yeah, so I think I need more practice against Boltyn to be able to really know what the overall matchup feels like. I just don't have enough practice against good Boltyns. I've only played against a couple on Talishar. It's not very representative, of course, and there aren't any in my local meta. Against Lumina, I think the general advice for Lumina combo would be try to block out the Lumina turn. If you can prevent them from getting enough, like if they only have like 3 cards in Soul, you can just block out enough hits so that they can't refill their Soul, and then that stops their Lumina turn, right? But it's also kind of difficult because they're probably going to be playing pretty defensively the first few turns, and they have cards that every time they charge, that's another card in Soul. So if they get like 5 charges, then that's
basically
enough to
unstoppable. Yeah,
double triple Lumina. And if they like,
or if they have Spirit of Arena too for the 2 extra action points on your Luminous.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's just more text that you have to block out. So
yeah,
it makes it even more difficult. And Arakni trigger obviously cannot control. If you get incredibly lucky and banish 2 Luminas, then congrats on the free win.
Eradicate.
Yeah, exactly. But I think you of course cannot aggro them down fast enough to stop them from getting to the Lumina turn. So they're going to get to the Lumina turn. I would need more experience. I think just off a general feeling, it's probably unfavored against the Lumina combo. But the reason that Boltyn, like hardly anyone plays Boltyn, is that he has so many other bad matchups where they can deal with it. So you're probably going to be dodging a lot of Boltyn. If you do play against one, then I don't know, try to block it out.
Yeah. And then for Dory, how do you feel there?
So Dory, I think, is rising up in popularity in the recent meta. Has decent matchups against pretty much everything except for maybe the Guardians. But like other than getting iced out, she has a strong matchups against a lot of the field, and also again is one of those niche hero things where a lot of people don't know how to block her effectively and don't know how to use their D-reacts, and like don't know when to let the first swing hit to force them to break their bolters or something, to go for the second swing. I think practicing against Dory is the only way to get good at blocking Dory, and thankfully, I play against Shin a lot. Shin's a master Dory player, has probably the best Dory list out there. So he trained me, and I beat a Dory the other day on Saturday in Swiss. Because I knew how to block out, and I knew when to take 2 hits to let them have the counter, so that I could go for a disruptive turn on my own. I knew how to do that dance. Dory is I'd say like heavily unfavored, so worse than Briar for sure.
Worse than Briar. Let's go.
Yeah,
worse,
not like an auto.
Yeah,
like maybe not a go next the way like Fi is, but it's pretty bad, mainly because you can't really fatigue her. she's probably going to be bringing in like the whole the whole 70, because against Guardian she already has the plan where bring in all the cards and then maybe a Remembrance to get back some more cards. And because she just swings the weapon, she doesn't go through as many cards as you, and sometimes you don't have a D-react in hand. You got to overblock against the weapon, so like she gets like 2 cards for none of her own cards because she just pitched. So it's really hard to fatigue her. Against her, I would bring in like everything except for the E-Pots and the Warhorn, just to have a large enough deck size to try to keep the totals even. And I think it's worth trying to set up a good Eradicate on her just to even the deck size a little bit more, and also having Surgicals in the late game that you can Remembrance back to play additional times to force those 2 blocks at the end, like 2 card blocks at the end game, is really powerful. CNC is also really powerful because the best list is probably going to be running at least 6 Steel Blade Shunts against you, maybe a couple of Yellow Shunts as well, and maybe some Sync Belows. So stopping those is quite good, forcing them to block with their inefficient cards. So one thing I didn't touch on in like the general Arakni playstyle stuff is that let's say like you were to program or train an AI to perfectly play Arakni,
Sure.
then what it would do is because one thing computers are really good at that humans aren't is they're perfect at memorizing stuff, right?
Yes.
And if you were to play Arakni perfectly, you would memorize every single pitch and every single card you put to the bottom in the exact order in your opponent's deck, as well as memorizing your own pitch stack, because you're definitely going to see your own pitch stack.
Yeah.
I definitely don't have the memory capacity to memorize every card.
Yeah.
And I also wouldn't want to, because that sounds exhausting. Like it is already very tiring to play Arakni to a decently competent level. But it's very important to memorize key cards. Like if you're against Iyslander and they have 2 Frost Hexes out and you see an Frost Hex on top and you put it on bottom, you better damn well count every single card in that deck and keep a running count in your head so you know exactly when that Frost Hex is coming back. Because then you'll know when you need to go for like a double cut to the chase to put it back on bottom, or when you can go for an Eradicate and like which card is, if it's the 3rd from the top, how much damage you need to push to banish that Frost Hex perfectly. So memorizing key cards like that is really important. For Dory, it's the same way. Being able to memorize like the 3rd Twinning Blade, so to like know when instead of pumping, they're just like if they gave it the go again, when to block for Xaxes so that they play the Twinning Blade so you don't overblock on the first hit. Stuff like that is very important to know those key attack reactions. Seeing Steel Blade, it makes it more difficult because it is a tutor, and they get to shuffle their deck afterwards. So my general game plan is to try to track the 3 Seeing Steel Blades against Dory, get them all out of there, and then track the key cards like Twinning and also the Spoils of War and Warrior's Valor. Usually if I see a red Spoils and Warrior's Valor, I send them right to the bottom, just to try to space out the Go Again, because Dory often has problems with Go Again. And another card you want to be very wary of is CNC. Dory's probably going to be running 3 CNCs against Arakni, and it's very problematic when like they give the attack their first attack Go Again, but they don't have the second swing, but then they use the remaining 2 floating resources just CNC you, and you overblocked on the Dom Blade. Like, oh well, I have some D-reacts in my hand and one in my arsenal, but I can't play these. I guess I lose now.
Yeah.
So yeah, being able to track those is pretty crucial. Luckily, Dory doesn't really have a lot of dominate. Like Iron Song Determination is probably one of the worst cards in the deck, and you don't see
Yeah,
it very
that's fair.
much. So if you have a D-react in Arsenal and one in the hand, you generally want to play the Arsenal one first. And also like putting stuff like Sigil of Solace in your arsenal to bait out the CNC is also really helpful.
Yeah.
So yeah, overall unfavored. Dory just it's just too hard to fatigue against a competent player. So
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the brutes. Let's start with Rhinar because he does have that intimidate mechanic, which can make
right.
it a little rough for you. So how do you feel about that?
So based on the experience in paper, I would say 50-50 to maybe slightly favored. Like maybe close to the top of the 50-50s along with Dash.
Yeah.
Where the intimidate turns, like they're scary, of course. Like yeah, maybe they can super high roll and do 10 damage on turn 0 when they win the die roll. The intimidate turns tend to be spaced out fairly far. Like
Yeah.
a lot of the best results that Rhinar has gotten is not on those try to high roll turns, because you can't high roll through an entire tournament, right?
Yeah.
You want to be a little more consistent, and a lot of Rhinar builds play more towards the consistency on the attacks than the super huge barraging beat down into Blood Rush Bellows into like triple attacks turns,
Hmm.
because they're probably gonna have like one of those, and it's going to do 20 damage to you, but you still have another 20 life to play with. So against Rhinar, you still play the same game plan of just block out the big attacks. Rhinar doesn't really have much in the way of on-hit effects, other than like maybe like the pseudo on-hit effects like pulping,
Hmm.
where if you have a D-react in the arsenal and then one card from hand to block to stop the go again, it's really helpful.
Yeah. I think.
Um,
Yeah,
but,
I would
so
say
go ahead.
Rhinar's like biggest claim is just like trying to set up at least 2 Blood Rush turns with Tunic up, and then
Mhm.
just other than that, consistently just going like 2 cards for like 7 or 8.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
the thing with
That's
Arakni is the fact that you run the 6 or the 3 sinks and the 3 fates really minimizes those turns, because a lot of times like how
Mhm.
they push even more damage is with the barraging, and if you cover that up, then it's like they
Yeah,
don't
exactly.
quite have enough.
Yeah, barraging does nothing if you just block with 2 cards, right? So
Yeah.
it makes it a lot less threatening. And I think most Rhinars don't run like the red barragings, even as like it's in the yellows and the blues for extra intimidates.
Hmm.
But I think if you just accept that you're going to take some big damage turns and then block out as many other turns as possible. Also, if you have like an Oasis in hand and a Tunic, you can respond to the Intimidate trigger by just playing the Oasis to prevent 4,
Like a Mandible Claw or
which is really
something.
helpful, because yeah, you don't want Oasis to come back into your hand if it gets banished, right? So like
Hmm.
you play the Oasis first, and then you banish your attack, whatever. So you block out as best as you can. The other nice thing about Intimidate, of course, is that the card comes back to your hand once it's gone. So on your turn, you might have even on their big turns when they intimidate your whole hand, you're going to come back with 3 or 4 cards in hand, and if you have some good attacks in there, you can actually get through with say you bring back 3 cards and you have a mid-game dagger into surgical extraction. That's really powerful, because Rhinar doesn't block super well. It's just like their armor, and then like their cards, they do block for 3, but they need a ton of cards in their hand to be able to play their big turns out. So
Hmm.
if they're just swinging for 6 with 2 cards, then it's way less threatening. You can block with 2 cards, and you're perfectly fine with that. And the other thing about Rhinar is that because he has to draw and discard so many cards, he chews through his own deck, and sort of self fatigues.
Yeah.
And against Arakni, most Rhinars are going to be bringing in like 65 to 70 cards to just try to make up that difference. And for Arakni, I think probably going up to like 63, 64 is fine.
Yeah.
But Reiner's going to chew through his own deck pretty fast. So that makes things a lot easier. If you see like a Blood Rush Bellows on top, it's usually fine to just bottom it, because if they see it the second time when they're in their second cycle, it's really bad when they're drawing into like 2 blues, and the Blood Rush is kind of just like coming in for 6 damage over the course of the entire turn, and you can still block it out with 2 cards. So yeah, Rhinar, I'd say it's on the favored side of 50-50. Of course, they can still have big turns and punch through for a lot of damage if they
Yeah.
high roll, but against the
Totally.
consistency, yeah, favored is probably reasonable.
Yeah. And
So,
I would assume the same for Levia, right? You just block out until they kill themselves.
yeah, pretty much. Of course, they can still have big turns, but Levia being Levia, it's yeah, matchup's not that bad.
Yeah.
There's a reason she's barely played at all. So
Yeah. Would you
yeah.
even put her in the buy tier, or no? Is that too far?
No, that's definitely too far.
Okay.
She can still go big and
Yeah.
be like, all right, here comes 8, here comes 13. Like, oh, okay, I guess I'll just take it. Yeah.
So Viserai's in an interesting spot because he's kind of looked as one of the worser aggro decks, similar to Katsu, but at the same
Mhm.
time he's gotten some more like OTK support. So I have seen some players like tinker around with that at ProQuest. So
Right. So
from
the
there.
like the OTK Viserai with like that's running Reaping Blades to stop sigils, and also a bunch of D reacts, and just like stacking up 50 rune chants. That is a completely unwinnable matchup, because there's no way to um,
Kill them.
there's no way to kill them before they have 50 rune chants, and you can't block 50 rune chants coming in with a ninth blade of the Blood Oath, right?
Yeah.
So yes, that's an auto loss, but on the other hand, there's no way that deck ever beats Iyslander. So
Hmm.
it's kind of self-selecting, and of course, terrible matchups against a lot of other things. Frankly, I think that deck is kind of a meme deck.
Yeah.
So most Viserais you encounter, if they're at the top tables, they're probably going to be on like the standard
Trill, mob skies.
non-attack. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Non-attack, attack, go again.
Rosetta.
Rosetta. Wow. Okay, that's my turn. Yeah. So I think that one I would put in favored.
Okay.
What I would do is I would run AB2 to fully cover the
Yep.
the Rosetta and the and like the maybe Sonata for 2 cards.
Yeah.
And maybe Looming Doom if they're running that. But the thing about Viserai and also Briar is that they have to play a non-attack and attack every single turn in order to do anything. And if they don't, then their turns are completely useless. So just by the fact that they have to chew through so many cards to get stuff done, they sort of self-fatigue, right? Because
Yeah.
a lot of their cards also draw into additional cards or like tutor for additional cards.
Yeah.
So they thin their own deck, and then by the time they get to the second cycle, they're doing stuff like coming in with Dread Triptych after not making
Yeah.
a rune chant already. So yeah.
Yeah, I think Briar just has that Channel Mount Heroic turn, whereas Viserai kind of doesn't really have that. So
Yeah, exactly. Briar can totally high roll you. Viserai, it's much more difficult. Like they're gonna have maybe like a Mordred into Mob Skies into Revel for like 15 damage through your entire blocking hand, and they're gonna do that maybe twice, but that's only 30 damage, and then you can block out the rest of the deck, and then you're fine, right? So
yeah.
Just play super defensively against Viserai. I think it's quite favored. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Lastly, let's touch on the Guardians. My homeboy Bravo. I would assume is unfavored.
Yep.
Yeah.
He's unfavored. Yeah. So Bravo, like Dorinthea, is pretty hard to fatigue. And same with Oldhim. Guardians are hard to fatigue because they can just hammer very efficiently. Where the you have to have this really delicate dance of having enough damage to threaten their life so that you can last ditch them efficiently, because last ditch is the only way you can beat a guardian, like a good guardian. So having that last ditch doesn't do anything if they can
if they're
block
like
out 2 last
15 or
ditch.
something,
If
or
they
20.
if they block 12 against 2 last ditches and then they still have life left, then you're in big trouble, right? So uh, you need to be able to sort of do that also, but also have enough cards to like try to get them to just a few bad blues in their deck, so they're still swinging hammer, and you have to have that life buffer so that you can eat a hammer hit, so you can have your last ditch turn, and then maybe remembrance into another surgical or last ditch. It's very difficult to do efficiently. That doesn't mean it's impossible. Having a lot of D-reacts means that the dominate is a lot worse, and pummels tend to be pretty telegraphed. So being able to cover pummels is good. The 2 unmovables are for these big guardian attacks, and I think Arakni uses them pretty well. You do have to be careful with CNC, of course. CNC into pummels, like sometimes you just gotta accept it, but also Oasis is really good. So bring in pretty much the whole sideboard except the wizard cards, and just try to stop as much as you can while also dealing damage and disrupting their hand and looking at the top of their deck and bottoming key cards. It's tough, and it definitely requires a lot of practice in order to hit those guardians.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is when I thought about this matchup, I was like, I can probably just hammer every turn and then pitch stack like a crazy second cycle. But then I thought about I can't do that because you bottom stuff, and I was like, wait, I can't do that.
Yeah, so I've had like a lot of my recent Bravo matchups have been people who are good at Bravo, but they're not very experienced in Arakni, and they have tried a few things like be super aggro, in which case like they chew through a lot of cards and I can fatigue them, or they like extremely defensive and play their like Blessings of Deliverance and trying to turtle up and just hammer every turn. But that doesn't work either, because eventually I will have enough attack reactions to punch through your defense reactions, and sometimes sometimes they have to like commit an unmovable to block for 1. Like if I'm only going over by 1, but they have the unmovable,
leave no witnesses.
Leave no witnesses or surgical. Like they have to cover it, so they don't have a choice, and their returns are really inefficient. So it's also difficult for Guardian to fully go one way or another. So the Guardian also has to play this dance of like, I need to disrupt as well as be defensive when I need to be defensive, and also maintain enough cards in my deck, but also have enough of a life balance so that I don't get smashed by by last ditch effort at the end. So it's tricky on both sides, but overall I think Guardian just inherently has the advantage.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of those fluid matchups. Like Guardian in general, I feel like for the most part, especially on Bravo, you don't really go into matchups thinking like, okay, this is my game plan, this is what I do. It's kind of like fluid of when to take damage, when to disrupt, and it's like one of the enjoyable things about a lot of heroes in this game is that, like, you know, you kind of have to adapt to how the game is rolling out rather than this is my game plan.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why this game is amazing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's never a dead moment, right? Unless maybe you're playing against a bunch of dragons and you're like, okay, I'll just pick them up.
In terms of Dory, Bravo, and Oldhim, which would you say is like the
Okay.
most unfavored?
Yeah, let's talk about Oldhim specifically. So
Sure.
because Oldhim has unlike Bravo,
Earth
Oldhim
React.
has a few different builds, right? So Oldhim, like recently, a pretty popular one has been like the aggro ice Oldhim because it's better against Fi, and you can go a little more aggro and disrupt harder. I think that one's probably the best for Arakni because you can still block out the big dominated attacks with defense reactions from Arsenal, and you can still have disruption, and they tend to have a little bit less in the way of defense reactions, so it's a little easier to go over, and banish off the top. And also the ice react. It's still powerful, but it can be played around. Like, so if you have 2 cards in hand, and then, like, you know, you come in with a dagger, obviously they're going to ice react you to put your last card on top, and then it's you're not having a good time. But if you have like an attack reaction in hand, you can often just like put the attack reaction on top, or if they're not coming into the ice react and then you attack, you can like pass priority, try to get them to ice react, and then in response play your attack reaction,
bait them out,
and then have them waste their ice react that way. So it's not terrible. Still, of course, pretty tough because of the inherent guardian advantages. Winter's Wail, I will say, is less problematic than Anothos because 4 is 2 less than 6. The Frostbite is less of a problem for Arakni than it is for aggro decks for sure. So that's damage wise is not as threatening, but Oldhim cycles through a lot more cards, and just the inherent damage prevention from Crown of Seeds on every Oldhim build makes that also more difficult because it doesn't cost them cards to prevent that 1 damage. The other style of Oldhim is the Fatigue Oldhim, and I think that one is in the go next tier. If you see 3 Autumn's Touches, it's probably a good time to just like pick them up and go get lunch, because
you see tomorrow's, you're like, oh no.
If you see tomorrow, it's hopeless. There's absolutely no way. Earth React completely dumpsters Arakni because it covers both daggers, right? You don't get the piercing from damage prevention, so it covers both daggers, and they have another one off a crown, and they can block your attacks with shield, and they have 1 floating. Like maybe they're going to Oasis you. It's just awful. I don't think that one's winnable in any world. They're going to bring in their own remembrances just for fun, you know. So
I do think
you're not winning
in
that
most
one.
events though, you don't really see like pure Fatigue Oldhim. Like they will have like. They might get more Earth cards. They might even run more Oakenolds, but they're not like, you know, pure like, you know, 3 Brothers in Arms, 3 Oasis type Oldhims.
But even so, if you even if they're only running the 3 Autumn's Touches, that's a really big problem because you're not going to be able to banish all 3 off the top, right?
Yeah.
And if you get to the late game where he has like, you know, 8 cards left in the deck, he's just going to be cycling that 1 or 2 Autumn's Touches, and then there's what can you do against Autumn's Touch? There's nothing. Like you cannot be Earth React as Arakni before you run out of cards yourself. So yeah, Earth React is just way too strong for Arakni to deal with. If you see 3 Autumn's Touches, it's GG. And even like the more aggro ice Oldhims, maybe they're just running 1 or 2 Autumn's Touch, and often that is enough to just ruin your day. Like even 1 Autumn's Touch, if it's cycled properly and you don't banish it, that could be game over. So a very, very problematic build to deal with.
Yeah. And which would you say is harder to deal with, Bravo or Dory?
I think Dory's probably a little more difficult. Again, assuming highly competent pilots on both of those. Yeah. I'd generally rather play against Bravo than Dory.
Yeah, they're probably like closely unfavored, but Bravo is just, you know, more telegraphed, easier to play.
Right.
Whereas Dory's more taxing to like keep track of and stuff.
Yep.
All right, so this is our matchup tier list for Arakni, and I think it's funny because I've made a lot of these for a lot of heroes, and this is probably the only one that is like bottom heavy.
Yeah, because everyone wants to say that their own deck is the best, right? Favorite against the entire field. I'm here to tell you the truth. Arakni is not a good hero right now. The top 4 decks in the meta are Oldhim, Fi, Iyslander, like maybe Dromai and a few others. Terrible matchups against all of them. If that's your meta, like, you know, don't take this to a calling and expect to hit top 8. So yeah.
Yeah, you see these ice and fire, you're dead.
Yeah, you're having a bad time. You see Autumn's Touch, like, okay, go play side event. So
okay, well, that just wraps about the video. This went longer than I expected, but I had a good time. Thanks so much for coming on, Taotao, and giving me
thanks
your
for
time.
having me. I had a lot to say.
Yeah, no worries. Is there anything you would like to close off with? for
No, I think
individual?
oh, maybe we should talk about that Outsiders, like the one card they did reveal.
Oh, true.
So
Codex.
yeah,
Yeah.
Codex. Yeah, so Codex of Frailty, I think is really interesting. The initial impressions on this card were very positive from a lot of people. So sort of like on the
Myself included, but
right.
not
So on the face,
necessarily in your playstyle, I would say.
yeah. So just on the face of it, what it does is Um, uh, generally, you're to get the most value out of this, you're going to be playing it with an empty hand, right? Like if you have no cards in hand and no arsenal, then you don't have to discard. So you play this from you block with 3 cards. You don't have an arsenal. You play a Codex, and then you get back your 0 cost or maybe your 1 cost if you have Tunic. Then you put it in your arsenal. Your opponent either does nothing because they already have an arsenal, or they put a card from their graveyard into their arsenal and then they discard. So it's card neutral for your opponent either way. But then you get a ponder token. So at the end of your turn, you're going to draw a card, which you're probably going to arsenal. So that's a +1 card for you. Your opponent gets a frailty token. We don't exactly know what frailty token does, but from the sound of it, it should be something that sort of debuffs them somehow. My guess would be maybe some of their cards block for 1 less value. Maybe it's similar to like Spider's Bite, where either just their attack action cards or like all of their action cards block for 1 less, something like that. Or maybe their attacks do 1 less on their next turn, which would be I think fantastic. But it's probably not that powerful.
Yeah.
Because that'd be nuts against 5. Like all their that'd be like this round's on me, but for 0, and you also get a card. So like, yeah, no way it's that powerful. But it's probably something that's close to like one block point or 1 life point worth of value off of the frailty token.
Hmm.
So on the face of it, because of the ponder token is a +1 card advantage. This card costs 0 card advantage. You get your best attack back. You can 0 for 4 of them to have a breakpoint attack, and then and Leave No Witnesses has this nice disruptive effect where you can you either threaten the arsenal that they just put a card into, or they have to block from hand with at least 1 card.
Yeah.
So it seems very powerful. In Fatigue Arachne, I hesitate to call it extremely good for a few reasons.
Hmm.
One is blocks 2. If you see these early, it's really problematic
Yeah.
to block out with it. It's also only good when you have. It's only really good when you have an empty hand. If you have to discard for it yourself, then the card advantage suddenly becomes not card advantage. Yeah, you get a card back, but it's card neutral, and you have to do a little bit of cycling. But that's still like, even if it's not a card advantage, you still get to replace itself with a ponder token. Maybe you have a bad ponder token and you draw something that's not quite as good, but still it's still good flexibility in the mid game. You also might see, if you run 3, you might see this before you see Leave No Witnesses, which is okay because as it's yellow, you can still pitch it for a dagger, and it's not terrible that way. And the last problem with it is that, especially in the late game, if you see this, you get your best card, sure, but your opponent also gets their best card.
Hmm.
And that can also often be really problematic when they drew up to 4 cards, right? You get back your Leave No Witnesses because you want to play it this turn, and you kind of have to get back 0 or 1 cost with Tunic on your turn. Because
Yes.
if you don't play it, then you don't get any value off the ponder token whatsoever. So you have to get something that you can play immediately, which is probably going to be Leave No Witnesses or an Eradicate. So you attack with that. They can block out with 2 cards. They have 1 card left, but then they have their best card in their arsenal, and sometimes that's enough for them to just ruin your day. Especially if you're playing on this fatigue plan where we're trying to get rid of all their best cards, and you're getting them to play their best cards. You're banishing cards off the top. If they get their best cards back, then it's it's slightly counter to that game plan. So I am cautiously optimistic about this. Maybe Outsiders going to have a lot more aggro assassin support, and you can play this in a more aggressive style where you still block with some cards and get value out of this.
Hmm.
But in that case, in the aggressive plan, you're not getting value out of you're not getting the card advantage value because you have to discard, right? If you have multiple cards in your hand. So
Yeah.
it is in that awkward spot where it seems like it's sort of built for fatigue, where you play it as the last card in your hand, but you also don't want to be giving your opponent good cards into their arsenal. I'm still going to definitely try 3 of it, and maybe it's going to turn out to be great, but I do have some minor reservations about this card. But it looks cool, and
Yeah.
for if nothing else, I can probably replace the 3 yellow Cuts of the Traces, which are probably the weakest yellow cards in the deck. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the ponder token is interesting because in a fatigue style deck, it's kind of important what you put in your arsenal rather than just like throwing whatever in there. But like even a 0 for 2 blue is like not terrible, so that part is fine for the most part. But I think a big part of it would probably ride on, you know, how good the Frailty token is. If it's like pretty good, then this might be an auto include. But if it's just like, you know, 1 point of damage or whatever, then it's like may see like 1 or 2
Yeah.
of, you know.
Well, even 1 point damage on a card that also already gives you card advantage off the Ponder token, it's
Yeah.
still it's still definitely worth considering.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't see myself running 0 copies of this. There's definitely going to be some amount of this in my deck. I just don't know how many.
Yeah. All right. I think that just wraps up the video. Thank you for coming on, Taotao. And
Yes.
be sure to
Again, thank you for having me. Make sure to like, subscribe, hit that
Yes.
notification bell.
Yes, thank you, Taotao.
Follow on Twitch. Do you have a Twitch?
No, I don't have Twitch.
Oh, okay.
You can follow me on Twitter, I guess. I tweet
Yeah,
sometimes, but not really.
And Instagram and TikTok. Make sure to
Sure.
lube up on all of those platforms.
Yes. All right. Thanks. Bye, YouTube.
Bye.